Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Living Tantra Podcast. Today, I am back with a very special guest, Andrea Michelle. Andrea has been on the show before, and we've done a couple other podcasts as well together, one of them being Human Rights, which is her new podcast, which is incredible. And we get so much feedback about how alive, inspiring, and stimulating our conversations are together. And I think we enjoy it. So here we are back again today. For those of you that don't know Andrea, she has a deep connection to the cosmos and a unique approach to astrology. She supports her clients to live courageously from their soul-steeped self. She draws inspiration from her embodied connection to Greek mythology, Eastern Tantra, South American shamanism, and esoteric Western wisdom streams. Andrea has a gift for illuminating your personal thread within the tapestry of human evolution. She's presented for the Sky Astrology Conference, the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, and was also a teacher for Astrology Hub's Inner Circle in 2022. She's a featured astrologer in Astrology Hub's newly launched flagship reading platform, Astrologer Connect. We'll have her links below in notes to both her podcast and exciting upcoming offerings. But for now, just big warm welcome, Andrea. I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you. It is always a warm welcome from you, Catherine, for sure. Yes.
So today we wanted to have a conversation around devotion. And devotion, as I speak to it through the lens of the portals, through the lens of our Shakti, through the lens of that innate thread of conversation that inevitably weaves our conversation with the transcendent and the transcendent into the mundane, into the tangible. It's not a place where we begin, but it is a place that we culminate and offer ourselves from, essentially to initiate the next octave of our evolution, of growth, of a paradigm. So in the 5 initiations of Shakti, which is a perspective on how Shakti sort of moves through 5 different phases in our experience, there's the first movement of desire, which is that natural sort of draw or ignition of awareness. It's not so much about an object or a face that we're moving toward, but it's that inner movement of desiring that ignites an excitability, a turned onness that sort of opens us beyond the focal point or the perigee of what we've been available for in the past. So from desire, which is a natural opening, the next sort of movement of our Shakti is an exhale into discernment. So we open into desire, and then we need to discern, once we've opened, what we're choosing to take in or to move toward or to allow. So discernment is a little bit more of a hardening or a slight closing or just a reducing down, where again, we're still excited, but we have more of a sense of ourselves and where we end and where we begin. From discernment, we move into dark Eros. And this is where the excitability of our desire and approaching that first place of, oh, I don't know, really starts to trigger our deeper, maybe hidden shadow material. And the dark Eros is where our deepest, darkest expressions of manipulation, of submission or overt power reveal themselves, and also the deep, deep pleasure that we get in these experiences, which keep us recreating them. the deeper we go into exploring our dark pleasure and not following through with it, but allowing ourselves to stay full in the experience in us of it, whether it's eroticism, whether it's raw primordial pleasure, but not giving ourselves over to the experience, the more it moves beyond the dualistic fixation of pushing against or overt power over into a full experience of what some would say hurting, or the alchemization of when our pain starts to emerge into a fullness of love in our hearts. From here, we experience a death. And so in death, it's a cessation beyond good and bad, right, wrong, pushing for or against our experience. And we simply die to the way or the paradigm or the knowing of how we've lived and been ourselves in the world. From death, as long as we're still in this human body, if we fully surrender to this experience, not knowing, there is a natural upwelling eventually that will occur in our essence that is an offering of ourselves from the charnel ground of who we've been into the unknown of what's to come. And that's how I describe devotion. So that's sort of a map of how we arrive at devotion through our sexual, soulful anatomy. And now I'd love to hear you speak to devotion, Andrea Michelle, through the lens of the cosmos or the lens of above, which is so ironic because for you it's so deeply embodied anyway that it includes the body. So,
you know, I've heard you and I've been on the receiving end of your teachings of the 5 faces of Shakti before, but it's a new experience now to hear you talk about it again. So thank you for that. And it's a perfect way to start speaking about devotion, especially with you spoke about the next rung of the spiral. Because for me, within devotion itself, there's a triplicity. Like devotion, humility, and gratitude are intimately tied together. And I loosely map them to, very, very loosely, this is just starting to arise, and it has no, it's not set in stone, but for me, devotion, humility, and gratitude in the triplicity is like maps to the maiden, mother, crone. And so each of their, like, and again, like you say, it's a spiral. So devotion brings us to humility. Humility lands us in the ground of our being. And in the ground of our being, it opens us up to gratitude, which then begins a new octave of devotion to what we don't know, which brings us to humility, which is not knowing, right, brings us into the ground of our being. It literally brings us to our internal base camp, which then we open to the gratitude of being connected within our bodies to source, which fuels the devotion. So it's this sort of chain that just keeps spiraling up and down, back and forth. So, and the maiden, mother, crone thing is just maiden, the innocence of the devotion itself, this purity of longing for something. And the mother is the resting in the ground of the nurturance that I get from my offering to something outside of me, seemingly outside of me. And then the crone, the elder, appreciating the gratitude of what got me here. And then the devotion back to the innocence that is also inherent in each one. Each of them has the facet of the other within them. I hope that's not too confusing.
So because you're an astrologer, among other things, your language is often articulating through astrology. And we had talked, or you had mentioned about the relationship of the asteroid goddesses to devotion. But as you spoke of that, you said you don't refer to these goddesses representing archetypes. I would love for you to speak to how you see them and how the maiden, mother, and crone fit into the asteroid goddess map that you do.
Oh, I love that. I haven't thought about that in detail, but we'll see how that can emerge. So there are 4 main asteroid goddesses that I work with, plus Eris, the dwarf planet Eris. And actually Ceres is considered a dwarf planet too, but the 4 main ones that are in between Mars and Jupiter. So Mars is the last of the personal planets. And Jupiter and Saturn in astrology are the social planets. And so for me, the asteroid goddesses in between are literally feminine bridge between the personal and the social. They help to break down any calcification around the individual and the collective and what I'm here to do. They help to inspire and support and again bridge the places in us that are simply, it's all about me or it's all about you, or it can be both, where we can be in our sovereignty, have an understanding and discernment around what's working, what's not working in the social sphere, and then engage my gifts to better the social sphere, and to also not be an island and just do my thing without having some connection with what's happening outside in the world. Where can I best refine my gifts to be an offering to others? So for me, they're very much a bridge in that way.
And connected to integration, would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's another astrological phenomenon that I speak to often that's really been intriguing me about how with Venus, the goddess or the emblem in astrology, the way that I work with her, of the feminine, our feminine wiring itself in an archetypal way, these asteroid goddesses are facets of our feminine wiring, right? And Venus technically can only get, because she's closer to the sun than we are, she can only get to 45 degrees elongation from the sun, which is not a limitation. It's simply what the astronomical reality. And for me, these asteroid goddesses, which are beyond Mars, can actually have a relationship, like astronomically, not just astrologically, astronomically, where they can go farther than Venus can. They can go all the way to the opposition. They can have an opposition with the solar force. So it's like they carry the feminine energy beyond form. It's this beautiful sort of, it's still forming in me what this actually means. I'm not in any way, shape, or form in any place to really speak much about that other than that intrigues me. And again, for me, it's this bridging function of the feminine, this agentic feminine. Yeah.
Can you introduce us to each of the ones that you work with? I mean, in your work, you're so about relationship with these beings or consciousness or frequencies. I'm not sure which word you would use, but can you give us an introduction?
Absolutely. So I like to refer to them as wisdom streams that contain archetypal energies within them. These archetypes seems kind of cold and like something that is beyond the human capacity to really form relationship with. But for me, the wisdom stream it also appreciates that these beings are sentient in and of themselves. They too are evolving. They're not just rocks in space, right? They have a sentience, just like Gaia. The earth has sentience and is also evolving. So, and they seek relationship with us. They don't want us to become them. They want us to form relationship with them through our unique wiring and their unique wiring. So for me, Vesta is the wisdom stream that contains most purely the archetype of devotion itself within her. She is associated with the element of fire. So she carries the original soul spark that we are, the star dust that we are, and she helps us maintain a connection with the fire of cosmic love, you could say. And then we have Pallas Athena, and she is a facet of devotion to me, which is discovering our unique capacity for the feminine to be to be a viable path toward awakening. It's not something that is really, in some wisdom cultures, in the esoteric traditions, they honor and revere the feminine as powerful forces, but it's not something that is necessarily really understood or appreciated. So for me, Pallas Athena is the feminine wisdom and a feminine path toward awakening and enlightenment as being, or just becoming more real, right? As a viable way of getting to more of who we are as a human being, in our fullness, in our capacity to meet life fully. And she's also the androgyne. So she is the wisdom stream that is most associated with the comfort of being both in her masculine and her feminine. She's the mentor archetype in a lot of ways for men and for women. So that's how I see her or feel her. And then Juno, she is also an archetype, or she contains the archetype of devotion to the beloved. So it's the other as the next iteration of devotion within ourselves to cultivate our own inner flame, to keep our discernment, our love, our unique self-substantiated honoring of ourselves as a unique facet of all that is. Through Vesta, she then is where am I, the longing for the connection with the beloved as aspects of me that are as yet unknown. So she is she's more the goddess of partnership, of soul contracts, of any kind of contract. She is oftentimes in the Greek mythology, she's also the goddess associated with childbirth and marriage, the archetype of marriage itself, but it's the inner union, the sacred marriage, the inner tantric union, ultimately, of what I am and what I seemingly was not, but where that comes together, the 1 + 1 = 3. So that is her, she's the devotion to the beloved, what is yet unknown to me, that I long for, that I'm attracted to in another, that I have not yet integrated in myself. And then we have Ceres, the dwarf planet. She's the largest of the quote unquote asteroids in the asteroid belt. She is the mother. She's the earth mother. She's the goddess of the grain. She is also very much the way that I hold her, and she is most strong for me. The archetype of, her devotion is to the return of natural law, the wisdom of the cyclic nature of time, of life, I should say, of being the formless within form. She's the initiatrix. She's the one who, through her travails, discovered how to die before you die. She became human for a time, which I can't help but, every time I speak of Ceres, I can't help but bring that up. She's the only one of the Olympian gods to become human for a time, to suffer as a human being. So she had a direct experience of how we suffer as humans. And as a result of that direct experience, that and her moving from suffering as a victim to using suffering as the charnel ground, as you spoke of beautifully before, of a sense of self-empowerment, how to empower myself, and how my suffering is teaching me something about myself, to become embodied wisdom. She is very much about embodiment. How much do we actually have it in our bones, in our tissues? And she alchemizes, again, suffering from a victim to suffering empowered. And she's the rites of death, dying before you die. So she's this natural law that she's devoted to, is the natural law of everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And somewhere in there is the continuity of life, which has no differentiation of any of that. I hope this is somewhat clear.
It's so rich. I'm just taking it all in. It's not just your words, but literally what you're transmitting as you're speaking about each of these. And I'm feeling my experience of them in my chart, and how, receiving more of me through this, through your sharing. So there's two more. One more.
Well, there's one more that there's plenty more, but the ones that I work with.
Eris is the one I was waiting for.
Eris, yes, thank you. Gosh, Eris, and she's beyond the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. She is even beyond Pluto, but she's very prominent for me, just because of where she's placed in my chart, and also because she's going to be becoming more active for all of us as, speaking astrology, the nodal axis moves into Aries and Libra in mid-July. The nodes are going to be on, the North Node is going to be on Eris. And the North Node is where we are all collectively wanting to have experiences to awaken us and to go into places that we are not yet familiar with. So there's a lot of depth to her there, but she's very, very powerful and not as easy to access. So for me, to get to Eris, not to get to Eris as if there's a place to go, but it's easier to receive her or to form a relationship with her when we go through particularly Ceres first, because Ceres and Eris have a specific resonance literally in the discovery chart, in their discovery charts, which I work with often in my practice. But basically the discovery chart is when they first were discovered and became aware in our consciousness. That has a birth chart too. So for Eris, she is devoted to a return to her wholeness. She has a very wrathful quality to her, which is wrathful, right, Catherine? And please elaborate or make any corrections to what your understanding of wrathful. But it is sourced in, as the Buddhists would call it, emptiness. But it's also, it's an immediate, it's how love, kindness manifests as activity to cut through illusion, to cut through where we are not in relationship with the moment, where we are not in relationship with the truth that we are and situated within life reality accurately.
Fierce love, the tigress.
Exactly.
Everything that is our wake-up call, kind of not so gently redirecting us back towards this truth. Yes.
Right on. Yes. And the only reason it's not gentle is because that shows us how disconnected or dissociated we've been from reality. So that she's not, there's no punishment, right? There's no, it's just simply what is, the truth of what is. And so it can be very challenging to assimilate Erisian lessons, because we might get caught up in the content of what's been provoked by her coming online in us, rather than remaining, feeling the content, but being the context in which it's happening. And so
yes, to intimately dance with Eris means that we have to have enough of a ground within ourselves, or a primordial ground, a ground beneath the ego. Yeah, so that we can essentially die
Yes,
to
exactly.
ourselves. Yes,
Exactly.
yeah. And
Hence the
so,
series.
yes, yes, yeah. Okay, now I understand the connection. Beautiful. So, what is her expression, Eris's expression of devotion?
Hmm.
I mean, I feel it in her fierceness, in her
Yeah.
engagement. Yeah.
Yes. She is. She's devoted to inseparability.
Mm. Continuity.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Of what's true. Yeah.
Exactly. And the union of polarization
Mm.
in her non-coherent, I use the word distorted rather than, negative, or immature would be another way of putting it.
Mhm.
Form. She's about continuing separation, this sense of being the outsider constantly, but because of safety, because that's all we've known, that's how we've, in one way, shape, or form, become associated in our nervous systems with who we are. Very unconsciously, we perpetuate a separation, perpetuate ourselves as other, or it can also manifest as where we can see bullshit. We can call it out in others, but we can't recognize it in ourselves. We refuse to recognize it in ourselves. And
Mm.
so the opposite of that is everything is the path, even our bullshit, even our, so the devotion to the non-othering
Yes.
of what the othering drops us into, to show us the clear reality of how separate I am from my reality and truth, to bring me back, to create the devotion and the devotional engine, then to come back to, because sometimes we have to go a far afield in order to
Yes.
be then drawn back to the center. And oftentimes that's what she requires, is to take us into the extremes in order to have the opposite merging, coming back.
Yes. Welcome to Tantra. We're speaking about Eris. I can feel my Shakti turning on. I'm getting warm. She gets me really,
Yeah.
fired.
Well, she's very
And she's right on my IC. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So I just want to take a pause here with you and I and invite the audience to just tune into these wisdom streams that were just introduced to us through Andrea, and just kind of feel into which ones you resonate most with, or you have an affinity or a curiosity about, and just bookmark that for now. At the end of our conversation here, we're going to share more ways that you can explore these deeper in your own evolutionary journey with Andrea Michelle, but just while they're fresh in your awareness, just kind of bookmark that. So Andrea,
Yes.
before we got on today, you said something about devotion being inherently a feminine quality. Can you speak to that?
And again, I know, just for your audience, feminine is both in men and women. It's not, male exclusive. But this, for me, devotion is, it is a longing for union. It's a longing to be recognized as sacred, as a part of creation. Me, the word, for whatever reason, for my own personal wiring and my own personal journey right now, being seen is often the word we use, which is a completely 100% appropriate word. But for me, being recognized gives something of a contour to it. And for me, devotion is contouring love. It's giving it a face. And oftentimes that's why in a lot of, but not a face of a person necessarily, although oftentimes that's how it starts. Like in as you're well aware, Catherine, in a lot of Eastern spiritual traditions like Buddhism, there is the devotion to the guru, right? Which is the way to activate this place in us that is devoted to life, to truth, to love, to putting a contour. And I use the word contour in terms of like engaging it. It's not just some ephemeral thing. To give it form means I have something invested in it, in a way. There's a tangibility to it almost. And ultimately, it's not about the teacher, the guru. It's what they represent in us, that we are originally, again, projecting outward in a sense, but it's to recognize that in us, to build the connection. So there's a natural wanting to connect, a desire for this, to keep alive my relationship. It's like initially it's like on the other end of the spiral, like you said, it starts with the desire and ends with devotion. But what starts what? Because devotion can then fuel more desire to know more of me. Now that I have this contour, what wants to be contoured now? And it's not about creating a structure that's tangible or that has to be lasting. It's just for whatever. Devotion can put a face on or a contour around something to give us the container, again, like Vesta, as like the fire, that our earthly form is the container for our devotion. So it helps to illuminate. Literally, devotion illuminates sacredness. I don't know if this is answering your question about why it's.
Yes, no, it's beautiful, and it's stirring a lot in me too. Maybe you would articulate this more through the lenses of the wisdom streams or the Asteroid Goddesses. For me, I'm recognizing through what you're saying that there is my acts of devotion, which over time build an integrity in what I'm choosing and directing myself toward. For example, being a mother, there's a lot that I do through my day, things that I don't necessarily want to do, but my doing them is an expression of my choosing or my devotion to my son, or essentially my devotion to being a mother. And then there's an experience of devotion that in me is almost like a bell that gets toned when there is a certain recognition, either dharmically or on some profound soul level, where inevitably it's almost this upwelling through my Shakti and my heart of giving myself, of sharing. And that's devotion that is beyond any kind of conceived action or even doing, but literally how we are moved so deeply from within. And that level of devotion to me is an essential compass on navigating our path through our soul, through the eyes of the soul. And when we follow that compass, inevitably we are going to meet, the deepest entrenched safeties within our ego that have challenged us, in every way, from truly following that deepest seed of maybe embodied desire in that way.
So good. Yes. This is an aspect of devotion too that you're touching in on, which is perfect. It's almost like it gives us the motivation to continue through the hardships. Devotion in itself has like the staying power to like not hardships, like the challenges of life. It's like devotion is the fuel that we might not like going through our day-to-day life in certain ways, like paying bills or, having to go to the dentist, whatever it is. Not that we need devotion for that, but that's like a mundane version of like, I'm devoted to whatever is required of me in the moment. for me, not for something outside of me. But it's equally, there's a component when we're really in touch with devotion of self-honoring, of self-reverence, that I'm doing things that I might not like personality-wise, but devotionally, it carries me. My devotion is what carries me through the tasks. That's what fosters the humility to recognize that sometimes I have to do what I don't want to do. Sometimes I have to have experiences that I don't like to get to more of me, to get to more of an honest relationship with me. And devotion kind of like is like the nourishment that we need, the backpack, like the fool grabs, the image of the tarot card of the fool with like the lunch pack on the back or whatever. It's like that to me, it's devotion, right?
Yes. And the more, we've really embodied devotion through our Shakti, there's no choice.
Yes, exactly.
Even though our mind is going, this is absolutely crazy, this makes no sense, our body and our movements are choosing. Yes.
That's exactly right. And as you talk about, when it awakens us to the Shakti stream that it is, the Shakti phase, like you said, then it's like literally it seems like it takes on a life of its own, but it really is just illuminating more of who we actually are.
Yes,
having that aspect of us come forward in whatever the facet of us, the contour of us that's showing up now.
Yeah, beautiful. What's coming from what you're saying too is the remembrance of, even in our devotion, because on a Shakti level, it almost becomes a very pure archetypal priestess experience where, we're literally just pouring ourselves outward. And for me, part of my journey has been recovering or remembering to include my human in that, which means having space to have a reaction to what parts of me are choosing, or, yeah.
Well, and that's, for me, that's the outpouring of the sharing, is the gratitude facet of devotion, the natural wanting to, I'm so full in my devotion and we don't even have to be aware at a certain point of what we're devoted to. We just are the flame of devotion, like you said, the Shakti of devotion itself. And then whoever we meet, the gratitude that emerges, which is a self replicating, but a self-sustaining. It's not depletion, right?
Yeah.
If it's depleting, it's not devotion.
Yes.
If it's devotion, there's no depletion in it, and it might, So that, I love that you said that. For me, that's the gratitude.
Yes, and that's where exactly we lose sight of the object, and we simply are devotioning.
Right, devotion. Yeah.
Ah, so beautiful. Yeah. Anything else you want to share, Andrea? You're such a wealth of knowledge. Anything you want to share in your personal experience around your relationship, your evolving relationship with devotion?
Oh, very good. My devotion, astrologically, if you look at my chart, it's very obvious that I am wired for devotion. These asteroid goddesses are very prominent in my chart, but knowing that and actually forming a relationship with it are two different things. And so for me, it was the devotion, my innate, it starts off as commitment. Sometimes my innate commitment, which is for me, my commitment to more honesty and more truth of me, going into the places, the dark arrows, the other dark places that's been occluded to me. That's just, Scorpio, Pluto, for astrologers here. The richness of what we gain when we go to these places. That's how I had to access my devotion as Shakti. That's my wiring. And but again, Pluto is also the soul's desire. So it's in the darkness that we access desire. And it's so perfect because getting in touch with desire is what illuminated my devotion. And my devotion fuels desire. And again, it's that then it becomes this non-linear, this weaving of these wisdom streams and these faces of Shakti very fluidly together. So I would say it's going into the places that I was scared to go, but with guidance of mentors and through your work, which has been invaluable for me to open me into, but also feel where I can stay in previous places that I had to shut down for trauma or had to dissociate for trauma in my feminine circuitry. And to have a new relationship with that now is opening and enlivening devotion.
What you say about our feminine circuitry and how you mentioned that devotion is innately a feminine quality. It's true. I've discovered that in myself and then hundreds of women, as our sexual circuitry opens and our Shakti flows more fluidly, unhindered. Devotion is a natural effect of that. It is essential part of our essential nature. Yeah. Andrea, I would love for you to speak a little bit about how you're working with these asteroid goddesses and how people may choose to explore one of them further or a few of them within their chart, because I know that you've created a very unique way of working with them. And I also just want to mention, Andrea is far more than just an astrologer, as you can probably glean from the depth of her words. She uses astrology as an entry point into a deeper honesty and meeting of ourselves, essentially resting deeper in who we are, in our innate blueprint. So it's not something to take you here and out here, but it's something to take you deeper in to the relaxation of who you are. So with that, I'll pass it over to you.
Well, thank you, Catherine. So it was my devotion that brought me into, that started to crystallize or give contour to these pods that I'm beginning with this Venus Leo cycle that's coming up. And actually I have one with some of my most committed and long-term students. We're in a pod together. There's 6 of us. There's 5 and then me. And we've been journeying. We journeyed through Ceres. We haven't started Vesta yet. And actually I would start with Vesta and not start with Ceres, but these ladies have been with me for a while. But basically there's a light curriculum, but there's also very much the space of whatever is arising. It's not just simply me teaching about the asteroid goddesses and that's it. And it's more of there's a supplication that begins the journey, which is what comes to me. And the supplication is like a poem or an offering. A prayer, exactly, to this wisdom stream. And that holds the container for our whole journey together. And we journey together. I do one-on-ones with people too. I'm doing several one-on-ones. That's always an option too. But with the pods, it's 5 women journeying very intimately over 10 sessions. And everybody gets, because it's so small, everybody gets more personalized attention. We go into everybody's chart seeing, feeling, allowing the space to have a holographic experience of the wisdom stream from different angles of the chart. And it's amazing how many of the women are like, they're discovering how they're living it in their worldly experience, how it starts to arise in their relationships, how synchronicities start to happen, or they're just more awake or open to seeing these synchronicities that have always been there around where this wisdom stream is calling them to show up more fully through them, through their own wiring. So,
you know, Andrea, it makes me think about, you described what a discovery chart is. It's like when we first discovered the presence of these, and as you speak about these pods and bringing these wisdom streams into our awareness, it's the same thing. It's like once we discover them, they become active, they become activated in our experience. Question: do people have to have an understanding of astrology or know how astrology works? How familiar do people need to be with their own chart in order to engage in one of these pods? Is this for astrologers or,
For the groups, I would say yes, some knowledge of astrology, some fluency.
Mm-hmm.
For the one-on-ones, not necessary. An interest in astrology would be good, but it's not necessary because it's more, I'm finding that these one-on-ones are really more, well, it depends on the individual. You know, I try to cater them to whomever is showing up and whatever their availability is and what they're interested in getting from it. But I would say overall, yes, one doesn't have to be an astrologer or extremely proficient, but to have at least some understanding, excuse me, or aptitude or interest is definitely necessary to be part of it. Yeah, at least for now.
And for the one-on-ones, I mean, you're so adept at translating astrological terms into, excuse me, regular language, so that we can receive, this is a transit, but this means these potential experiences or awarenesses or tensions or will be more available to us at this time.
Yes, I do translate it from astrologies into more tangible, practical language. Definitely. Yeah.
Yay. Well, it is such a joy for me, one, to experience the blooming of the next octave of your work and the receptivity of it in the world, because you have so much to offer. And it's always so nourishing for me to have these conversations with you and just weave our individual wisdom perspectives into this common stream. So thank you so much. Is there anything you want to conclude with around devotion or your offerings?
Just how much I enjoy our conversations. I enjoy and so does my audience. They love it too. I get so much feedback about the weaving. The word weaving comes up a lot around how you and Catherine weave the conversation together. And it's so organic because there's such because, so much of my, at the risk of, saying this over and over, you are such an integral part. Your work is such an integral part of how devotion came online for me in a tangible, contouring kind of way. And I love that you have, a relationship with astrology too. So it's like we both awaken other different facets of those things with each other, like the Shakti and the astrology, and that where the language is there to convey and to transmit. Some of these things is such a beautiful thing for me to sit with you and have these sharings. So Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, Andrea, thank you so much. So all of Andrea's information and her links are below, along with a link to the 5 initiations of Shakti, which is an activation I did last year that's recorded in my shop now, that sort of goes through the 5 faces of Shakti you heard me talk about. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope that this conversation was uplifting and distilling and reminding you a bit more of who you innately are. Yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you next time.